Okay, first of all, that's a courtroom, not the Hustler Club down on 11th Avenue, Lori. I gave Sarah Boone the night off. I'm sure she will use the time wisely. Religious psychosis is any delusion or grandiose thinking associated with religious beliefs. One might think that they are a notable religious figure and that they possess special powers. Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow met in 2018 at a religious conference called Preparing a People, which is aimed toward the people who believe that the end is nigh, apocalyptic days are imminent, and they are preparing for that. They met through their mutual friend, Melanie Gibb. They saw each other again not long after, I believe at one of Chad's book signings. Chad is an author. He has written many books. He writes about his near-death experiences, his many past lives, and an apocalyptic world with other various gobbledygook. Every single one of his books, and there are a lot of them, is terribly written. He is consistent. Not long after that first meeting, Chad told Lori that they had been married to each other many, many lives in the past. They've loved each other for eternity, and that she is an actual goddess. This made perfect sense to Lori, and they decided to fall deeply in love and spend their lives together against all odds. Unfortunately, for people who are all dead now, those odds were their spouses and family members. Once they made this decision, they put not exactly a plan into action, but they had to do certain things, obviously, to clear all the obstacles in their way. Chad he can see into the future. He knew the world was going to end. I think it's June in 2020. And so kind of their well-being and future is foremost. So it gets complicated because So Chad had founded a church, mostly in his mind, called the Church of the Firstborn. And he believed that he needed to get 144,000 disciples, God's chosen people, Chad's chosen people, really, who would be protected by God during the apocalypse, when the apocalypse came. He also, I don't know if this is before he met Lori, but during their clearing of obstacles time, one of the ways that Lori would know if she should tell her brother Alex Cox to get rid of someone is if Chad confirmed that they had gone from light to dark. That's his personal scale that he can see. People are light, they're good, dark, bad. So if they were really dark, they had turned into zombies. Chad's basically playing Dungeons and Dragons, by the way. They had turned into zombies, and Alex Cox is now free to go do all their grunt work for them. Anything that Chad had to do didn't get done until Alex showed up and just got it over with. Chad is basically just sitting around being the lump that he is, texting Lori who's dark and who's a zombie and who isn't. Lori is masterminding the whole thing, really, and Alex Cox is doing all the work. Chad Daybell had decided that Rexburg, Idaho, is the new Jerusalem. I personally don't think the new Jerusalem is going to have an X in its name, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know why. I mean, what do I know? It just doesn't sound right. And coincidentally, Chad's brother, Matt, and his sister-in-law, Heather Daybell, already lived in Rexburg, Idaho. And Heather Daybell made it very clear to Chad that she did not only not want to see him on her lawn, but she did not want to see him in her neighborhood. And my guess is that Chad, in general, and his ideals met with a lot of that, because not only is he founding his own church that's, already a tough pill to swallow, but he's the messenger there. And he's a leader. He is not, in my opinion. So by my calculations, of the 144,000 disciples, Chad had amassed 4 of them, not counting Lori, so 5. And if Lori hadn't come into the picture, he might have none. I don't know. So they are Alex Cox, Lori's brother, Zulema Pastenes, Alex Cox's new wife, Melanie Boudreau, who is Lori's niece, who Lori's next trial, after the one that's about to happen, is she's coming up against charges of planning his murder. And Melanie Gibb, who will join any club that will have her. So, in essence, or in summary, Chad Daybell could not even attract a smattering of disciples, not a smattering. Okay, and before Lori showed up, I don't know if Melanie Gibb was all in, although of course she claims she was never all in, but let's give him that. Let's say he would have Melanie Gibb. He'd have one of the 104. He only had 143,000 to go. Well done. Let's take a look at Chad's mom on the stand for the state in her son's death penalty trial. And more importantly, let's take a look at him sitting there.
Now we'll turn to your son, Chad, not Matt. Your son, Chad. And your son, Chad, is would you describe him as someone who's shy?
Can be.
Soft-spoken?
Yes.
More of an introvert?
And Your Honor, I think we're beyond the scope here. Objection.
Overruled.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he's a book writer.
Okay. So he's not someone who is I don't want to use that word. He's not gregarious. Do you understand what the word gregarious means?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He's not a gregarious personality, is he?
No.
Now, Lori is unarguably the more dynamic of the two. And it is not surprising that her tasks were taken care of relatively swiftly, although not well. The last one being Tammy Daybell, Chad's then wife, who had to spend years married to that schmuck just for it to end that way. The way being that, in my opinion, I guess that she was asphyxiated, but they don't know who did the deed. My opinion is because he was supposed to get this done. Lori's whole family is dead, her 2 children and her husband. And Chad had one job. No. I know Alex was there or in the vicinity or whatever, but Alex had to come and just do it because this was never going to happen. Not that that sounds like a positive thing, like he couldn't kill his wife, but it's not that he didn't want her dead. He's just useless. So, and it's very hard I question always throughout, like who really believed and what did they believe? And, because it's just so like, I think that Lori really believed. I think that Alex Cox really believed. Alex Cox was also dead, by the way. They said it was natural causes, but the timing was real convenient and suspicious. I think that they met, Chad and Lori, and I don't know if, how much Chad believes, but I think that they met because you wouldn't see these two together. I mean, Chad is just, it's obvious that she's the live spark there, and I think that they met when Lori was very deeply entrenched in her religiosity, her fanaticism, and he hit it exactly the right time because he was right there for it. Who doesn't want attention and someone who shares all their beliefs, seemingly? Now, Chad, throughout what we saw in trial, Chad does a lot of speaking to and texting with, I'll get into that in a second, those who have passed to the other side. And he would use this to control and manipulate Lori, which I don't know how this works. So considering what the crux is of religious psychosis, maybe he did believe, but it would make sense to me, subconsciously or not, that Chad would need to purport to be a vessel for others because he's not sticking up for himself. He's not going to open his mouth and say anything without, he's a wimp. So he would use that to, and I think that in the meantime, he had amassed a lot of anger had grown within him, because if you can never express yourself, if you're too much of a wimp, you get angry. So I don't know how much of that he actually believed, but he was real manipulative and very transparent. I mean, that's why I say she must have believed for a few reasons, but also anyone would see right through that. She had stopped talking to him at one point, or wanted to, because his wife was still alive, which is a lot of nerve. And he started telling her that he had spoken to this one, and there's a darkness over her, and she was going to be, and then he can't lift it unless she starts speaking to him. Real bullshit. So that being said, I never understand how much these people believe in what they believe, but people do believe. So I don't know what they thought the end game would be here. I guess to a degree you would think Chad, who is a coward, also would have to believe that the end was coming in 2020, because otherwise, but I also think they were just blinded by lust, which is disgusting. Hello, it's me again. So I just had to add one important piece of information that you all know, which is that they weren't just killing their family members to get rid of them, to get them out of the way. They were killing the ones who they stood to benefit from, insurance money or Social Security or whatever. Just to be clear, they weren't just killing to kill, they were killing for money. And I guess it was just universally accepted that Chad had zero earning potential and was never going to do shit. This was a very big week for Lori. She had a hearing for her upcoming trial for conspiring to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and also an episode of her interview with Keith Morrison for Dateline aired. Before we get too far from Chad and his texts and all that, the one question I would like Keith Morrison to ask Lori Vallow, and maybe he will, although I doubt it, is how did Chad text with dead people, and why? Why do they need technology for that? And why? I mean, now Lori's answer would be something like this: how do you know they texted? Were you there? Only I know, because that's how she answered pretty much everything. She was very defensive. To me, Lori she does have a charm about her. She has a charisma. I mean, charisma only goes so far. considering the crimes that she has committed, it almost works against her because it's like, really? But she has this, in this interview, it's like she's not taking herself too seriously. Even when she's being defensive and a little angry, there's an undercurrent there. She's kind of a bright spark. Has a bubbly kind of vibe about her. Let's take a look at her being defensive.
Lori promised to tell us the truth. Would she?
Were you there the night that Tylee died? Were you there the night that JJ died?
Was I
Was
where?
Alex in these places when they died? In the place where they died, were you there?
What place was that?
Did you watch?
What place was that?
Do
you have any idea?
I'm asking.
Well, I'm the
Doesn't
only
really
one that
matter.
knows. Do you know? You're pretending like you know.
It doesn't matter. I'm not pretending I know. I'm asking you a question. Did you watch your children die?
That's a really sad question.
It's a terrible.
I have to admit, the film noir film Sunset Boulevard came to mind while I was watching this.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
And shout out to Carol Burnett, whose adaptation is the best.
Now going to do a scene from my greatest silent film.
Yes, madam. All right. Give me pity. Give me anger. Fear. Love. Hate. Ta-da!
The texts that Lori and Chad had together, exchanged, were some of my most embarrassing moments, which is saying something. But as we know, these people, they don't have the get embarrassed gene, so we have to do all of that for them. I mean, I would plead guilty to a crime I did not commit just to avoid having those texts read out loud in front of Jesus and everyone, or my mother, or just anyone. But no. So, and there's one text that's seemingly innocuous, certainly compared to the others, the sexts and all that, but it has stuck with me. And it is, I'll tell you why after I tell you what it is. So Chad, right before they were going to Hawaii, Chad wrote a text to Lori saying that he is going, when they get there, he is going to get a tan, grow his hair out, and get abs. Which sounded familiar to me because that's exactly what I wrote in my diary when I was 14 years old, Chad. That's what I spent the summer doing when I was 14. Growing my hair out, getting a tan, and getting abs. I don't think that these interviews with Keith Morrison are going to get anything accomplished through no fault of Keith Morrison. Lori does a lot of talking, but no telling. There's no substance there. It's very reminiscent of Letitia Stout, who, when she was giving the story about that pregnant lady who looked really, really pregnant but wasn't pregnant, and Quincy Brown and Eduardo and all that. It's a narcissist when they tell a really big lie that gets them in trouble, and they're certainly not going to tell the truth, but they're also not going to shut up. This is what we end up with. Excuse me. And there you go. So we'll see what future episodes or segments hold, but I don't have high hopes. Back to Lori and Chad. Once everyone was gotten rid of, the two of them went to Hawaii, to Kauai, which, fun fact, not that fun, but I lived in the same condo gated community that they lived in when they were there. Not at the same time. And I mean, I wasn't there long, but I was there longer than them because I wasn't on the lam. So they went to Kauai. They got married on the beach. It was disgusting. And they were married in October, I think. October 2019, and she was arrested in Hawaii in February 2020. So just a few short months later. Chad was arrested in, I believe, June 2020 in Idaho after a thorough search of his yard, where they found Lori Vallow's children buried. They were both tried separately. They were both found guilty. Chad was sentenced to death. That's the trial that his mother was testifying against him, death penalty case. And Lori was sentenced to life without parole. Now, Lori did not want to waive her right to a speedy trial, so they didn't have time to really put together a death penalty case for her. So she was given life without parole. The other big thing that happened for Lori this week, as I mentioned, is she had a hearing for her upcoming case in the death of for the death of Charles Vallow. Keep in mind that Charles Vallow was shot by Alex Cox. These are the people who were there: Lori Vallow, Alex Cox, Charles Vallow, J.J. Vallow, and tyleeryan, her 2 children. The only person who is still alive from that group of 5 people is Lori. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a park across the street and kids are enjoying themselves, which is irritating me. If Lori did not take herself too seriously during the Keith Morrison Dateline interview, I would say that she took herself a little too seriously in court, despite the fact that she was dressed like Jennifer Beals in Flashdance. She did things like she gave her input when nobody asked for it, and it wasn't really appropriate, in my opinion. You know, she has been through one trial, hers, and the judge is a judge. And she was saying things like, it's been my experience that when jury selection and blah, blah, blah. And to me, that sounded kind of condescending and kind of silly. Like, don't do that. I mean, he's not giving you advice on how to curl your hair without rollers or a curling iron. You know, stay in your lane. Aside from that, she had a lot of, she's trying. I'll give her that. She didn't show up like Sarah Boone and say, well, first and foremost, I have no idea what you're talking about. She's not that stupid, but nobody is. She is as prepared as you can be if you're not a lawyer. And that's the thing, is there's a reason why we're not all lawyers. Because it's not only is it hard work, there's a lot of work, but it's a certain kind of work. There's a lot of memorization, and you have to, it's not enough to know the things, you have to use the things. It's nuanced. So things that you might read a case law or a rule that means one thing to the legally untrained mind, but to a lawyer who's using all of these in practice every day, it means something else. And that is basically what happened with Lori and her rules pertaining to what testimony, what statements can be used in court and what can't. She was mainly focusing on Alex Cox and tyleeryan's statements. So first, the judge schooled her on why her rules don't apply to hearsay and certain things that she was trying to work through with this. He kind of was like,
and accurately reflects the witness's knowledge. So I felt like 803B5B, the recorded recollection of his police interview and the body cam footage, applies under that exception.
All right. Generally, 8035 is a recorded recollection, meaning it's something they wrote down, or maybe they recorded their voice saying something. Let me ask the state to respond. We're just talking about the Alex Cox statement.
That does not mean what you think it means. And after that, when there was some more discussion of what statements of Tylee were admissible, the attorney for the state stood up and did this.
So on your response as it relates to Tylee, you say, again, present sense impression. I don't think it's a present sense impression. You also argue excited utterance. What else?
8033, which is mental, emotional, and physical condition with the same thing, her state of mind, then being scared. And also 8043, statement against interest. They use that statement in the indictment where Tylee says that Charles says, if you hit me with that bat, you're going to jail. That's the part where she's nervous in her interview saying she's scared to tell the police that she's the one that brought in the bat. So state of mind and the statement against interest both apply to Tylee's police interview.
All right, anything else? Does the state want to be heard further on that?
Your Honor, the only further thing I think that the state will bring in is that obviously the defendant has been found guilty of killing both Tylee, other individuals, but in this case, the defendant cannot benefit from killing a witness and then later try to bring in their statements for their benefit. So in addition to none of her statements being admissible under the rules of evidence, as any of the exceptions that the defendant has done, we also believe that it would be improper for her to be allowed to bring them in under that theory.
In other words, there's been a judicial finding that the reason Tylee's unavailable as a witness is because of the defendant's actions.
Correct, Your Honor. There has been a jury trial and she has been convicted of that.
In essence, Lori cannot use any of Tylee's statements to benefit her because she killed her and was found guilty by a jury. So, wah, wah, wah. I think that Lori is relying heavily on Tylee being her ticket out of this particular crime. She talked a lot about Tylee during her interview with Keith Morrison. I believe a lot of that was taken out. That's from what I heard. So this is really going to create a problem, I would imagine, for Lori. She did not say anything. We'll see what happens there. But that's nerve anyway, you know? Really? You're going to use your daughter who... Just not good. So that was the hearing. I have the kind of questions when it comes to people who do things like that. People who just do, I mean, especially when there is that fanaticism, that religious fanaticism. I just don't, obviously, because, I mean, if you're not mentally ill in that way, or even super religious to a degree, you can't understand that. And you have no idea what they're thinking. And they probably, I don't even know if they could clearly explain it. Lori told Keith Morrison that she's going to be exonerated by Jesus, or because Jesus is going to show up. And so I guess my question is, if she's going to be exonerated, why is she going through the trouble of being pro se and working so hard and doing? Is she just bored? Possible, maybe. I get it. I do think that Lori needs like kind of to be busy with something all the time, and this is as good a thing as any, I guess. Maybe because she believes she's going to be exonerated, she's willing to dip her toe into the legal pond and come what may. I don't know. But Jesus is going to have to pull some rabbits out of hats for this one. And we will be there for it. See you soon.